And then another. Hello, hello. I'd like to welcome you to the show because you are now tuned into a brand new Monday Night Live. That's right. AKA the Hangout stream, AKA the Chill stream, baby. All fired up and having some fun for December 19th, 2022, and brought to you by yours truly, the man. Broadcasting from behind the curtain, you know who I am. Because if you don't know by now, you can visit www.livefreeliverich.com or simply Google this name and you can find out. How you guys doing? Did you have a good week? Did you get some work done? You got some projects in the works? You hit some milestones? Did you do some holiday shopping? Does anyone do holiday shopping anymore? Or do we all just order stuff online? Do you still go to stores? Let me know. Drop me a comment in the section down below. Or you guys can let you know who's here. Sam. How you doing? When's your next live? Yeah, Christmas shopping, holiday shopping, whatever you guys do. You go to stores anymore? I'm interested to know. But tonight, let me clue you guys in on what's going on for the show tonight. Tonight, I have some more book deals for you guys. That's right. I do have some more book deals for you guys in light of the holidays. Keeping in the spirit of the holidays, I just so happen to have scheduled for tonight a little Christmas themed story I'll be reading. And let's see, what else we have? I might be watching a video from a Eurocentric podcast. That could be interesting, or it could be boring. I don't know. I guess I'll find out. I will be pitching a new hot topic for content creators. And of course, I'll be addressing some of your comments that were left during the week, which brings us right to my first segment of the night, where I like to shine a spotlight on some books that are currently available or coming soon to an online store near you. So first up, we have, this is from Facebook, from a Miss Goswami says, I have 4 children's books. So we have some children's books here about kindness, friendship, and the power of imagination. I would really appreciate it if you could mention them on your show. Thanks. Hey, no problemo. I did choose one out of those books featured tonight. That is Little White Angel, a heartwarming tale of friendship and freedom by Adrita Goswami. Let's check this one out. Little White Angel. Hey, DA, what's going on, brother? I'm assuming you're a brother. Or perhaps you're a sister. I don't know what the DA stands for. Is that your initials? Little White Angel, a heartwarming tale of friendship and freedom. Join Angel, the little white dove, on his journey to achieve his dream. This is the story of a little white dove named Angel and his journey to freedom. When the little dove gets blown away in a storm, Princess Olivia saves his life and keeps him in a golden cage in the royal garden. Little Angel slowly grows up in the golden cage and begins to long for freedom. Will Angel ever achieve his dream? We got some reviews here. Let's see. It says it's ranked. Seems like it's ranked pretty high, top 500 in children's folk tales, myth collections. All right. See what else we have here. Ginger Smith. Ginger Smith. Looks like we're going from children's tales to something a little bit spicier. New release, Cash and Burn by Andrea Bellmont. Cash and Burn. Her Savior Romance. A love short book. Number 2 in the series by Andrea Bellmont. Of course, all these books are suggested to me directly by the publisher. The publishers, whether they are self-pubbed, indie label, or from a small press company. If you have a book that's currently out on the market or coming soon, it could be in pre-order, you can drop me a link or join the Discord and share that with me, and I will mention it during a future live stream. It's not Cash and Burn. It is actually Crash and Burn. Crash and Burn, Her Savior Romance. All right, here's the blurb. Jessica Thomas lost her virginity in the back seat of a 1967 Camaro. She was 18, and Todd Atkins was 20. and the hottest guy in town. He also owned the fastest and coolest car. Jessie's obsession with speed began with Todd. She loved street racing and felt like Natalie Wood in Rebel Without a Cause every time they let her lower the flag. As she got older, she moved on to NASCAR, National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing, and hooked up with one driver after another. Now that's what I call living in the fast lane. Year after year, she lived in the fast lane. How do I call it? She lived in the fast lane, fucking the best and most notorious daredevil drivers. However, the years did pass her by, and before Jessie realized it, she was 35 and had little to show for it. Uh-oh. On her 35th birthday, her world collapsed. That night, Jessie swallowed 30 prescription painkillers. When she awoke, wishing she'd died, she met a young intern, the one who'd saved her life. He found her in the parking lot by her car, unconscious. In his free time, he raced cars. He'd seen her around. Dr. Peter Martinez had his issues. Latino, educated, handsome, and he had a love for all things fast, including women. For him, Jessie Martin fit the bill. He liked his women, seasoned and down for anything sexual, and his appetite was ferocious. And he'd vowed never to fall in love. Jessie had sworn the same. Sometimes vows are broken. Seems like a little bit of an erotic novella here. 93 pages. Sports romance. Sports romance. It's all for sport. All right. Next up from Joe Pranaitis, says, check Virginia White writes, 5-star review. This is Temporal Experiment is an exciting sci-fi time travel story that you don't want to put down. Temporal Experiment, Temporal Universe, Book 1 by Joe Pranaitis. Okay, here is the blurb. The year is 2363, and the Earth Confederation launched their first time ship, the ECS Andrea, commanded by Captain Joseph Dyson, who is ordered to take the ship 10 minutes into the future, but the experimental engines throw the ship 10,000 years into the future. Once in 12363, the Andrea picks up a signal from the Alpha Centauri colony and go and investigate. Okay. Once in 12363, the Andrea picks up a signal from the Alpha Centauri colony and go and investigate, but what they find there will surprise them. Thus begins their voyage back and forth through time, encountering friends and an empire bent on destroying them. 104 pages. Time travel science fiction, space fleet science fiction books. There's a lot of these sci-fi books feature similar kind of book covers here. It's just like a they just have like this, like a spaceship of some sort, and then it's just heading towards a nebula or a black, in this case, a black hole. It looks like some sort of black hole. You guys get into space operas? Now, we have this next one comes directly from the Discord, and we have Poison City by Egao Chan. I've actually read the first chapter of this one on an earlier live stream. Oh, shoot. All right. Poison City. Greed, resentment, ignorance. Poison City is one with a long and mysterious history, with 3 distinct districts surrounding the beautiful and ever so tranquil Lake Aki. Wealth is the symbol of the Northern District, one of plenty and opportunities. Innovation knows no bounds in the Southwestern District, an area of youth, passion, and minds. The preservation of rich history and tradition is the pride of the Southeastern District. It's a people of culture and familial pride. Layers and layers of scars growing on top of each other. Still, the festering wounds go unhealed. Generations passed, and blood and pus became the norm. Detective Marcus Kai had spent the entirety of his career trying to keep the fragile peace while attempting to find his own. But to find it, it seemed, required him to venture deep into the unknown and the formerly invisible and untouchable. Content warning: this novel has traumatizing content involving dark subjects and heinous abuses and crimes. Coming in at 448 pages, ghost thrillers, paranormal suspense, paranormal and urban fantasy. Yes, I do recall. I do recall some paranormal elements. And some action. All right, that's the books for this week. Be sure to tune in tune into the channel tomorrow and on the community tab, and you can cast your vote for which one out of those 4 books you thought had the most text appeal. So in other words, which one out of those 4 books would you be most likely to pick up? And of course, if you would like to discover more from the independent market, you can head on over to my shorts tab on the channel or check out the mystery packs playlist, and you can open up some mystery packs, and inside you'll find a cover card which features a book cover by a book from the independent market that was recognized by the Live Free, Live Rich network. And in the description, you'll find a link to an editorial written on that specific piece of work by yours truly. Let's move into some comments with this next little section here that I like to call Your Comments Matter. Yes, my comment section is not there to satisfy AI algorithms, people. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. And what I do is I just kind of let the comments collect over the week. And then I take the time to address those comments live on the air. Let's see what we have here. All right. Hey, Rainer. Traveling. How are the roads? All right, here we go here. So from the Right Mindset, Thomas over at the Right Mindset, he says, let's see, is that all blurry? No, that looks fine. Thomas over at the Right Mindset, tuning in again. He says, I love the title cards. This is from last week. He says, I love the title cards you use for the segments. Are you enjoying StreamYard? Yeah, StreamYard is great. For one, it's free to use. But if you want to upgrade, you can upgrade for a small fee. I think it's like somewhere between $10-20 a month, something like that. And then you can kind of have access to more customizable features. But free works for me right now. He says, and as always, I watched, liked, and commented. I appreciate that. I really am grateful you showcased the channel. I was hoping to get some more people to check out your channel, man. If you see this, I think you're doing some good stuff over there, for sure. Plus, I'd really like to see, like, Booktube. Booktube has quite a following. But honestly, like, I really would like to connect with more writers and people who are, people that are active writers and authors and whatnot. And there's just not not a huge, I don't know, there's just not like a huge pool of content creators that are like actively involved in Authortube, at least not on a regular basis. Let's see. You're an amazing soul, my friend. Absolutely. Let's get you on the interview. All right, set it up, man. I think it'll be a fun experience. It's really awesome how you do so much to spotlight on the community. I'll have to follow your Discord. Yeah, link's always in the description as far as the Discord goes. I mean, you're doing yourself a favor with that one. Anytime you have something that you'd like to share with me, you can just share it on there, and I'll mention it during the show. He goes on to say, I'm not really on it, but I need to start working on it. Everyone seems to be on it, and good stuff as always. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out ways to kind of like grow the Discord a little bit, because I feel like ultimately I would like to get it to the point where I'm not really like so active on Twitter or other social medias. Like I'd rather, like, if I could just like be like, say, like build up like a community of sorts on Discord, and then I could just be interacting with the people that are on the Discord. That would be great. But of course, I'll still be advertising. I'll still be using my other social medias as effectively just a glorified form of advertising. So I don't really like, my thing with social media is I don't really like posting a bunch of, in other words, I don't really feel like it's a good use of my time and effort. Not to say that there aren't a lot of people on social media, and if you're getting people's attention on social media, that it may be worth your while. But I just feel like when you put in a lot of effort on social media, because social media platforms are so friggin' rigged, and they basically they can throttle your accounts, and just having this knowledge. I don't know if you guys saw that recently, but there was on Twitter. They have the Twitter files, and one of the things that came out with the Twitter files was that, like, there was evidence that they were doing shadow banning on Twitter, or what we call shadow banning, but effectively what it is just like filters. And it's exactly how I imagined it too, like as far as the coding goes. So what it looks like what the UI looks like on their end is basically they'll see your profile, and then they can have a bunch of little tags. Like they have these little tags that they can attach to your file, to your profile or your account, kind of like a drag and drop type of thing, where it's just like they can just grab like a tag out of like I'm guessing there's probably just some sort of batch, and they're all categorized or what have you, and they can add these tags to your account. And what that does is like they all have like different things, like or different like sets of code, if you will. So basically, for instance, I'll give you an example. So one way that you can know that you have some bullshit attached to your profile is if when you reply to, say you reply to people's tweets, right? If you reply to people's tweets and then your tweet is in like the show more section, then that means that you have something attached to your profile. Like, in other words, if your reply is not readily available, like just like if someone clicks on the tweet, on the status, and then they just start scrolling down and see who's replying to it, and then yours is like behind, like someone has to like hit the show more button or something like that, then that means that you may have some filters attached to yours. Or if another one is if it says that if it says show tweets that may have offensive content or something like that, and the tweet itself might not even be offensive in the least bit whatsoever, but just because you have that filter attached to your profile, that little, it may trigger that to happen on your tweets, even if what you're tweeting isn't actually something that could be considered offensive. Hey, what's going on, man? Yeah, talking about the Twitter files. Talking a little bit about the about social media. So, like I say, I'd rather get more people onto the Discord server, because if I can get people, if I can grow the Discord server, then we can just basically have our own. Like, I can have my own like network of creators and writers and whatnot that I can like keep tabs with and become a little bit familiarize myself with, and maybe even like maybe we could do some projects together. Who knows? You know what I mean? That's what I'd like, instead of just that's what I was going to say before, is I feel like putting effort in social media is a waste of time for the most part, because it can often, you can feel like you're just screaming into the void, for one, because engagement is so bleak for the most part. It depends what your type of stuff that you're trying to post to. And I'm not into doing trends or try to do like viral stuff. I'm really not trying to be a dancing monkey here online. That's not really something that I'm trying to do. But yeah, so not only that, but your social media account, like your Twitter or your Facebook, can just be taken away from you in a blink of an eye, just like that, for virtually no good reason whatsoever. So, and plus it's basically, and I've said this before, is like social media is basically just a watered down version of a blog. So, and watered down meaning like the amount of things that you can do with it. Like, for instance, with Twitter, you can only type out so many characters in a post, and Facebook, they only allow you to do you can do longer posts, but you can only, well, I suppose you could do most things on Facebook that you would be able to do in a blog post on your website, but it's but again, all you're doing is you're helping out the social media platform. You're not really doing yourself so much of any favors, and neither they are to you, because they want you, at the end of the day, all they really want out of you is they want you spending giving them ad revenue. And I think that spending money for advertising on a social platform is a fool's errand as far as that goes, as I just said before, because they can just filter your account. So you could have, like, I have like over 1,000 followers on Twitter, but I look at my impressions on some of the status updates that I put on there, and it's like, on average, I'm reaching about 30 people, like 30 people out of 1,000. And I understand, like, say the 1,000 people that follow my account probably are following thousands of people. So I don't know. It really depends how people engage with your posts and stuff like that. I suppose makes a difference of who they actually see on their feed, which is another thing I don't like. That's also a form of manipulation. It's like, how do you know what people want to see just because they hit like on something, but that doesn't mean that they want to ignore everybody else that they've subscribed to or followed. Let's go back here to comments. So yeah, so networking is a big deal. Definitely. Oh, what are you saying? Jay says the recent Twitter change banning accounts from advertising your other social media. Oh yeah, I heard about that too. Profiles was scary too. They rolled that change back, but it still shows you they can do it at the drop of a hat. Yeah. So those of you who have those of you who are advertising any third party social media, Twitter rolled something out recently where it's basically like, if you say, even if you do a link tree that was one of the things. It's in their terms of service now. They can effectively suspend your account if you're advertising like third-party links or third-party social platforms on Twitter. So, and that includes like link aggregators like Linktree or something like that as well. So in other words, and I think that it's like in your bio section. I don't know. I just kind of skimmed through it myself and realized that it didn't really apply to me. So I was like, whatever. Even though I do think that that's shitty, people should be able to just, like, social media, they can run, it's still a private business. They can run their business however they want, but it's just like their practices, how they do that is just, it's very questionable. It's kind of bleak, to be honest with you. And the type that I start like seeing that type of shit, and it just like, it puts me down in the dumps, because it's just like, you know, that these people, it's just at the end of the day, it always comes back to two things: power and control. If it ain't one, it's the other. And it's just so sickening to me. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, I just want to be able to friggin' network with people. And it seems like for one reason or another, that's just proving to be a very difficult endeavor for one reason or another, which may or may not stem from power and control. All right, let's go. All right, next comment. This comes from T. Alex Ratcliffe. He has his own YouTube channel as well. I know that he's active in the Authortube realm of YouTube. And he left a comment on the most recent Hot Topic clip that I uploaded, which was on art in artificial intelligence. If you guys haven't been following that conversation, it's a bit of a spicy one. And it's been getting hotter over as time progresses here, especially between illustrators, because especially amongst illustrators and other like digital artists, even digital artists like graphic designers and stuff, because it's been quite it's creating quite a divide, I have to say. Anyways, so in part 5, I was covering an article that was featured on the Business Insider, and it was about basically AI image generators are counterfeiting mainstream artists' style. So styles from like mainstream artists in the industry being counterfeited by individuals who are using AI generators. So in other words, the article more specifically was talking about how they can put in the prompt in the AI image generator, and they can put a specific artist's name in the prompt, and it'll effectively create an image that counterfeits that artist's style. And the article was kind of talking about that, and they were sharing, and the artists, a couple artists were sharing their opinions about it. And then I was also commenting upon the possible legal issues that might arise because of that. So T. Alex Ratcliffe chimes in on the conversation here. He says, sounds like they're monetizing artists' work without their permission. Copyright protects against the use of someone's copyrighted work to make money. The AI needs samples. Therefore, selling the works generated by copyrighted material with the intention to monetize is copyright infringement. And then Jeff Potts chimes in down here and says what he said. Yeah, I don't know. I basically just say I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know the whole legality of that. Because they're allegedly these AI generators are creating original works. They're not, in other words, it's not taking from source material. It's like it's transformative, allegedly. Even like basically like the way that it was explaining it in the article is that these AI generators can use images as like a pseudo inspiration, if you will. But I don't know, without actually seeing the code, the source code, and understanding what the hell it is that you're looking at, you can't really tell one way or another. I kind of want to call bullshit on that, because I have seen some examples online where people were like showing an original piece of work from an artist and then effectively like a counterfeit version of that work generated by AI, and it's almost like a carbon copy of which. So it's definitely dicey. Like I've said before, it's dicey. I make it sound as if I'm like, don't get me wrong, like I'm not out here, I'm not going to be wasting my time out here picketing in the streets or spending my time online trying to convince people to stop doing something. That's effectively the same thing as like the gun argument. I would sound no different than those people that are like, we got to ban all guns. You know what I mean? They're already created. It's already a done deal. It's already out there. The technology is created. So once the technology is created, you can't really uncreate the technology. Once people have access to it, it's going to be out there indefinitely. So putting the genie back in the bottle is not something that I would try to argue for, nor am I trying to convince people that they're, a horrible person just because they want to play around with these AI image generators. People can do whatever the hell they want to do. I say, I have no interest in using those. And also, I've mentioned before that if you're going to be using those for commercial reasons, like if you're going to be using them in commercialized products, to really think about what it is that you're doing, because this is still new, and it's still new, and there's just a lot. I just see where there's a lot of room for problems. Let's just say that. So that kind of segues right into my next segment here. Let's talk about, I have a new pitch for you guys. In this for this week in Hot Topic. Let's do it. Yes, Hot Topic for content creators. This is where I pitch a hot topic of discussion to you, and then you either use my pitch as inspiration to create a video on the topic, or go ahead and leave a thought-provoking comment on the subject. Remember, if you decide to upload a video specifically about this topic, then make sure to tag me in it or share a link to that video so I may feature your video during a future broadcast. Today, I have a new topic of discussion that I'd like to launch on the channel. And the prompt for this subject is indie author folly. I would like you to share your thoughts and concerns about the public relations, business practices, or marketing strategies of indie authors or writers that you think is foolish, irrational, or perhaps nonsensical. And make sure you explain why by defending your stance with reason. Don't just claim that a particular behavior is stupid or someone's marketing strategy is retarded. Also, I must stress that I will not be talking about any specific individual, nor do I encourage you to spread gossip or slander. I really want this discussion to be a focus on specific behaviors, practices, and strategies observed within the scene as a general discussion. I want to use this topic as a means of discussing ideas and calling out nonsense. I want to talk about the stuff that makes you cringe about the indie scene, the things you think make indie authors look bad, and all your opinions about the ugly side of the market. So I'll be interested to see what you guys have to say on this one. Also, be sure to check out my playlist tab if you'd like to discover more hot topic discussions and give me a piece of your mind in regard to the other conversations going on in this channel. Don't be afraid. Tell me how you really feel. I promise. I won't block you on social media or put you in timeout for having what you may think is a hot take. There's no time limit on any of these hot topics, and it doesn't matter what order you watch the previous videos. Just know that obviously part one of each topic is always the initial pitch, but every installment after which is just a continuation of the topic as we embroider the various subjects that may surround it. So you never really know what you'll be getting yourself into from one video to the next. But as the old saying goes, if you can't take the heat, get the out of here. Okay. Let's move on to some news now. Some news and announcements. You guys working on anything? You guys in the chat? You guys just hanging out? Do anything special? Let me set up this next segment here. All right, as usual, like I was saying before, the Live Free, Live Rich network is on Discord. We do have a Discord server. And on the Discord server is where you can share your links. Basically, just use the Discord server as a one-stop shop resource for sharing all your links with me, whether it be your books, blog posts, videos off YouTube or what have you, submission calls. If you run your own little publishing house or indie label, crowdfunding projects. So I know the Comic Books Corner of YouTube does like Indiegogo events quite often and Kickstarter events. So if you guys would like to share those events with me, I would be more than happy to cover them during a live stream. Also, if you're on the Booktube realm of YouTube and you are hosting some reading events, or say if you're on Facebook and you run a book club, you can share those with me as well. I may be interested in actually getting involved. If that's the case, I've been thinking about doing something like that. Maybe it also get some, raise some awareness for the channel as well and what I have going on here. If I start volunteering for some of these type of events, I don't know. We'll see if the time comes up. Maybe I'll put that on as part of my New Year's resolutions. Are you guys working on your New Year's resolutions, or do you think that's shit? You don't do New Year's resolutions? I do. I had one for this past year. All right. So link in the description. The invite is always in the description. It's open invite. Do you guys want to join that? There's no expectations. I don't expect you to check in, engage in small talk, or idle chat. If you just want to use it for sharing links, you can do that. Let's see what else we have here. From EA Green. EA Green's coming back at it again. He says, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. December 16th through 20th. Free, free, free. Father, May I? Free on Amazon Kindle. I chuckled because I think he was doing that on purpose, because last week he had a book that was free and I was doing that whole free. So I think he like doubled down on the amount of times he said free. Let's see what else we have here. Pre-order. You can pre-order Red Water Dreams for free right now on Smashwords. Free until January 1st. And this is part of the Smashwords end of the year 2022 deals. Last week we were covering R.A. Morley's book, Let There Be Fire, which was part of the deal. That one is available now, and I will be leaving a link in post-production for both of these books. So you can pick up Let There Be Fire for free and hop right into it. And then Redwater Dreams will be available in 2023, but you can pre-order it. If you want to pre-order it, you can pre-order that for free right now. And then, let's see, the deals continue. We have from Winslow Swan. He says, hey, Jonathan, all my ebooks, all his ebooks, his whole catalog is 50% off as part of the Smashwords end of the year deal. So Winslow Swan, for those of you who don't know, Winslow Swan is a colleague of mine, and he runs a YouTube channel called Doorway to Nightmare. You may have heard me talking about it before, which is an audio drama YouTube channel where he's written and directed and acts in as well. It's a voice acting audio drama series. It's a mystery thriller genre series. But he is also an author, so that's what that deal was all about. His entire catalog, 50% off. Not bad. And speaking of stories, for you writers out there, aspiring authors, or if you actually have work on the market right now and you're just looking to collaborate and expand your creative portfolio, the Storyteller Society, we're reaching the end of the year, people. I don't know. I might reevaluate this project at the end of the year. But as of right now, the Storyteller Society is still accepting submissions. So we're looking for flash fiction. Flash fiction, this is fiction anywhere from 500 words to 2,000 words, okay? And any genre flies. Cool with that. Even if you want to write literary fiction, I'm cool with that too. And if approved, then you will book yourself a room at the Hotel del SS. That's right. Where your work will be showcased absolutely free to the public 24/7, 365. And that's just kind of phase one. I was thinking about expanding that, but I still I would like to see a little bit more interest in that project before I start taking it in any other directions. In other words, like turning it into a web series or anything like that. All right, let's move into some reading time. I have quite a lengthy installment for tonight. This one comes from Angelisa Fontaine Wood, who's contributed to the show before. Says, my no paywall Christmas story blog link riffing Dickens in New Myths. So I guess a little Dickens inspired Christmas story here. This is The Christmas Ball by Angelisa Fontaine Wood. Let's read I got two links here. First is, I believe, is her blog post, kind of talking about it. And then we'll get into the story. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. All right, The Christmas Ball. Without further ado, here for your reading pleasure is the story of a Christmas ball in London in and around 1860. People with characters, some of whom you know and some you don't, and others you may but vaguely remember and enjoy meeting again. How do stories come to us? Some might have a gestation decades in the making. If the germ of this one has a beginning, it may well be the dancing ghosts in the Orlando Disney's haunted mansion that I think was at the time and certainly still is my favorite thing about all those acres of annihilated ecosystem. Speaking of ghosts. But that waltz, that vertiginous, sound it out, vertiginous Viennese waltz to expose an impressionable and entirely to and expose. I don't know why I said expose. To expose an impressionable and entirely too romantic child to such a thing at a young age. Surely a story would eventually come of it. I once danced that very waltz, not on a snowy English Yuletide, but one heavy, humid summer's night under a full moon on the Savannah Pier. Not that the moon explains it. Upon projecting this blog entry, I was reminded that I also danced the pavane in a Sarasota nightclub, and I remember doing some sort of moves of yore in the grand hall of Chenonceau. I can't pronounce that. One chilly and drear November afternoon. I have an entire history of this kind of nonsense behind me, a whole curriculum, vitae, anachronistic dances in corners of places where time just might, for a moment, slip out of joint. And it was this kind of nonsense that slowly, eventually, developed into the story linked above. The Christmas Ball, which New Myths kindly chose to publish for their December 2021 issue. Anyway, do enjoy. Here is your formal invitation. Yes, to the ball. Let's go to the ball, shall we? Chip, chip, cheerio. The Christmas Ball. There we go. All right. So from newmyths.com, The Christmas Ball, Angelisa Fontaine Wood. The dancers shattered into a twirl of fragmented movement in the mirrors lining the walls. Despite the ballroom's heat, I shivered into goose flesh at his icy hand between my shoulder blades. Though light on his feet, perhaps because he had none, my partner's chains tread heavy on my toes. Fetters, however, were no match for the heady waltz losing us in its vertiginous spin. Yet, when I listened closely, he was counting, not 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, measuring his steps, rather vast amounts of money, 112 pounds, 5 shillings, 2 pence, while sighing. He seemed to be adding up some kind of accounts, unable or unwilling to otherwise converse. I dared not look at what damage the irons inflicted on my threadbare slippers, decades out of the fashion, almost as far back as Mr. Marley's pigtail and tasseled boots. All proceeds from this charity Christmas ball, a new event in the social calendar given by Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge, went to the children of the East End. As with anything sponsored by the celebrated philanthropist, attendance meant opportunities to make social and other connections. Potential guests vied for entry, snapping up tickets. With Mr. Scrooge's legendary open-handedness, it surprised no one that invitations came offered at no fee. For poorer maidens such as my sister and me, who must wed or be lost. Some weeks before, in fact, my mother fetched the day's mail and found an envelope of swooping script addressed to Miss Foxley, my elder sister, Emily, and Miss Jane Foxley, myself, to Mr. Scrooge's Christmas ball, falling on my birthday, December 24th. Charlotte and Sophie, still in short skirts, pouted but made us promise to tell every detail. Settled on attending, our only problem was how we might beg and borrow proper dress for it. Mother's hands shook as they opened the envelope. They always shook at any sign of someone on the doorstep, even for postal delivery. Ever since my 10th birthday 7 years earlier, we had been awaiting my father, a chancery lawyer, to light the candles on my birthday cake before I would blow them out. I would entrust only him with my one wish, to become a poet, cherishing it deep in my heart, since he had given me my first verses this year before. Instead of Papa at the latch, though, there was a knock at the door. A constable appeared to tell us that he had been crushed by a runaway cab whilst crossing the street. These short words snuffed out our little security in the world. Its candles unlit, the untasted cake was tossed into the rubbish, and my wish went unconfided. We spent our Christmas Day in the bitter stench of black dye and calling for the undertaker. My broken papa laid out in the parlor. My sobbing mother, nonetheless, gave me both a locket from herself and from my now late father, a diary with a key. From that moment, the diary and all its incarnations in after years became for me my father's ear. He had inscribed it with a verse of his own: a lock and a key for your thoughts to be free. As if he could read them, here is where I put unwhispered dreams and hopes, dashed and discouraged for the most part, but standing yet firm there in my own handwriting. Diary and locket were the last superfluities. It's quite an extensive vocabulary, this one, I have to say. You really like those syllables. Straight away, we cut expenses. We all of us cried at the loss of Bridget and Mary. Not really 100% sure everything that's going down right now. This seems like there's a lot of exposition. But it looks like these girls kind of getting a backstory on her family. And these girls are invited to the ball. With no more schooling beyond, however, there was that spirit that was dancing. So obviously there's some paranormal stuff going on here. With no more schooling beyond what my mother could provide, we would now open our own doors and cook our own meals. We gave up the circulating library. This is the economy I recall most keenly, even beyond our home itself, as we moved to cramped and dank basement lodgings in Leicester Square. Calling it reading rage or poetry mania, I needed my books as I needed to breathe. We cannot sleep without dreaming. How was I to live without reading? I assuaged this by telling bedtime stories to Sophie and Charlotte, hoping to fill them up on fancy, if not a square meal. My diary held captive princesses and robber barons, secondhand Tennyson and Scott, high adventure and noble sentiments. I kept from the little ones, for my father's ghostly ear only, my grimmer scribblings, tales of our thrice darned stockings squinted by smelly, sparingly used tallow candles, or grace over the Sunday cabbage stew with some shank and the everlasting potatoes for the rest of the week. Feeling his presence supporting me, I would propound on the whole dreadful scheme which trapped the poor in general and women most particularly in the cogs of its fetid machinery. In other words, life sucks for women and the downtrodden. When finally there were no more blank pages, Papa slipped further back into a past beyond my grasp. Nevertheless, I scraped together what I could of the unused parts of old ledgers or other such particularly blank volumes discarded by more fortunate folk. I bound these with a length of ribbon in a knot known only to myself. My wish to become a poet did not, however, remain under my secretly tied string. For one, as our fortunes changed, my mother distraught and Emily gone for a governess, it fell to me to give Charlotte and Sophie their lessons in reading. I could not long hide my particular passions for Miss Browning and Mrs. Bronte. For another, they would often find my brow furrowed, rapping my skull with a pen at a stubborn rhyme. This gave rise in game to such inspired collective doggerel as Mr. Keats bleats indiscreet feats in heated sweet mince meat of elite parakeet. I could not help but giggle at it despite my somewhat loftier poetic preferences. At all events, even after shelving that first diary, I kept its key close to me in my locket in remembrance of my father's last gift, indeed his last words, hoping I might one day find matter in them to publish a volume of my own. Meanwhile, that Christmas, Emily found herself between situations. For my part, I could follow her as a governess, but knew from her letters, between their lines, What life this was, neither upstairs nor down, fish nor fowl. One must fawn over offspring, however obstreperous, obstreperous, yet ward off a mother's jealousy, in whose eyes they could do no wrong. Worse, one could fall prey to elder sons or even husbands. This last I only learned as she came home for good that Christmas, confiding to me in the dark as Sophie and Charlotte slept, escaping the talons of a particularly insistent employer. She did not know whether she would have references afterwards. We agreed to keep the worst of it from Mama, and all this on a market glutted with governesses going for such meager wages as to laugh and so keep from crying. Nor did I have her accomplishments, no French nor piano, to garner better earnings. I was 17 this very night and had no notion how to drag us out of second-hand clothes, rank with Sunday cabbage. Such was life with a widowed mother living on a tiny annuity with 4 daughters. She dreamt of taking lodgers, especially in a seaside town in the south somewhere where her cough might improve. In our tiny rooms with me and my sisters, this remained a pipe dream unless we could marry just well enough. Not with the 10,000 a year the novels promised, but to climb towards a life with a maid of all work, and perhaps, if well enough indeed, a cottage with some rooms down Brighton Way for a mother in her old age. An event such as Mr. Scrooge's ball could potentially turn into a ladder up and out for at least one of us, and perhaps the others might follow. Heaven knew we hadn't much opportunity to meet gentlemen otherwise. I like how gentlemen here are looked at as an opportunity. How romantic. Those present, however, may have been happy to let their tickets go. Those present, however, may have been happy to let their tickets go to the relief of the utterly destitute while they made their useful acquaintances, but were less likely to choose a life partner from the simply downtrodden. Emily danced with a baron who afterward partnered me. The dances done, he left to fetch refreshments, but was never more seen. Once I gave up all hope of his return, yet another in a long line, I swallowed back brimming tears, set my face towards the ballroom once more, mouth molded into a smile. So dancing here at gala charity balls with gentlemen who might afford such things, girls like us were, in principle at least, as much the beneficiaries as the ragged small ones of Aldgate High Street. If only our rewards might be a new pair of shoes rather than a lucky glass of lemonade and a quadrille. The society damsels flitted in their bright array of ribbon and lace, never lacking in partners. The stuff of my own gown was drab and rough under my even rougher hands. I was a moth, certainly company for all those who had made their dinner through the years on the one silk shawl my mother had lent me. My sister had her lone bracelet with the garnet, while I wore my locket. Whatever the charitable venture be it his housing for crippled children, his literacy efforts for those without schooling, or his program of public lectures in the science and literature, Mr. Scrooge must always, always involve his old business partner, whose name still graced his business as full partner through his funeral had been before I was born. Dead as a doornail Marley, as our host called him, thinking after all these years still to punctuate the words with a slap on the back, when no back was to slap. Our host lifted a glass in a toast. A word for my old friend and partner, Jacob Marley, who gave me what I thought the fright of my life, and in fact saving that life, saving my soul even, 17 years ago tonight. The story is known to all. I shall not detail. After then, going over those night's well-known events, our host bewailed the orphans and widows and encouraged one and all to give generously, to indeed partake of a raffle for that same mission. The prize in question he held aloft, a hand-tooled and embossed blank book of Moroccan leather from Bond Street, like something in which the Lady of Shalott might set down her cursed destiny. My heart raced at the thought of filling it with stories unspoken. The tickets to participate, however, equaled our family grocery bill for a week. After the toast, chatter swelled once more, and I overheard those nothing that in the years gone the shade had lost some of his padlocks, and lighter seemed the chains that bound him. Fewer and fewer each year, yet coiled about his person remained one ponderous cable of iron, decked with a money box and padlock. Older guests agreed and spoke of his lingering as his chains grew lighter. That must have been the case, for linger he did. And clearly he favored the poor girls, though none of us could decipher the meaning of his mutterings. Apparently, as others of his partners before me had passed the tale, he mumbled the amounts of the dowries that might save us from ruin, adding up the pounds and shillings against our own undoing, each credit and debit like a whorl of black and red reeled off. He could not stop counting, or it was his own remains of damnation cursed, we whispered, with the depths he skewered out of the miserable, leaving him to wander the earth in his irons and return to hell at each daybreak. Another girl assured me that they were the sums of his sins, and what donations to unfortunate it would take to save his soul from torment. Or again, the total of the evening's gains. I almost feel like this is almost written. It almost reads like it's written in kind of like a, I don't know, like a cross between a broken English and an old English. I promised myself to write it all down in the remains of my current makeshift ledger book, and fingered my locket with its old hidden key. There were but a few pages left until I must find some partially blank volume or loose quire. And so, with an eye to amusing Charlotte and Sophie, as well as filling the end of my journal, I looked out at the bankers, magnates, and nabobs. My glance landed on a peculiar young man, slouched in a corner, slender. His dark hair fell over a wan brow. Even across the room I could see his pale eyes as they stared out distantly over the gay crowd of cavorting ladies and their cavaliers, as though they were worlds and not mere feet away. A sort of invisible call seemed to separate him from others. At first I couldn't say why he caught my notice, but that he did not engage in the prevailing merriment. Perhaps it was because his attitude mirrored my own dull spirits. Refusing any shadowy turn of thought, I asked myself how I might conjure him for Sophie and Charlotte. Mark, he is dark and stark, but for a spark, not one for a lark. Lone and unknown, skin and bone, with eyes that shone, he doth moan. I stopped myself there and wondered why I thought he would moan. Was it the numbered sighs of my erstwhile wraith still echoing in my ear? The young man spoke to no one, belonging to no particular party. After what seemed a long moment, he broke our gaze and looked down. I could hardly have been surprised with my dowdy garb. As for the rest of them, these gentlemen would indeed dance with the dowerless, dowerless broad, but hardly looked at our faces, their eyes fixed clearly on the walls, duty done to dance with one and all, but nothing further despite our host's best laid plans. I cheered myself from the hopes sunk in my stomach by capturing for the little ones the brilliant finery of the dashing, if unreachable, dandies and behooped belles of the ballroom's splendor of curled gold and red velvet, how even I might evoke my uncanny dancing partner. As the rooms bore down their heat upon my bare shoulders from the candlelight and overly galloped bodies, I almost longed to feel those chilly fingers once more at my back. But for him my dance card was woeful. A paper rose bravely attempted to hide my bodice's mended flounce, but did not entirely succeed. This idea belonged to the fairy-fingered Emily. Teaching me what she knew, we had begun that week to take in shirt-making and miscellaneous mending. As Sophie and Charlotte read aloud from their exercises to our corrections, I did the plain, Emily the fancy. Pulling needle through linens and silks, pricking my finger as often as not, we daydreamed the impossible, a shop of our own. We would lose caste by it certainly, and it was hardly a way to fortune. It could, though, provide a stable respite from knowing that Charlotte and Sophie had often but bread and butter of an evening, or knowing Emily was in the grips of another cad, or again, our mother's health. Still, it was stories merely again, as we hadn't the ghost of a chance of amassing the capital needed to invest in such an enterprise. In my heart, what I wanted was to write about the unfairness of this hand dealt us, ours and that of so many like us, and so many far worse off. This is very Dickens of you. In my head, each tedious stitch became a turn of verse, and these words were not for my sisters, nor my long-gone father, or even for my secret self. I wanted them to expose the rot of this predicament far and wide to eyes who might finally see and act. Despite these long hours of practice, even my sister's skills could not wholly hide my gown's age and defects. This, I feared, heralded no great things for me as a potential partner, the time of a dance, or for longer. As the band began a mazurka, and I sat next to my mother, hoping to seem demure and alert and nonchalant all at once, while in fact gazing out at the snowfall. I wished I might step out to cool down and perhaps, if none were looking, to catch a snowflake on my tongue. Hey, Herman. Yes, indeed. It's a long one. It's a long one, too. Grab yourself a cup of hot cocoa. Kick back and relax. The mirror's angles allowed me to spy Mr. Marley amongst the other gentlemen, his lock boxes rattling despite his careful gestures, and those surrounding him stiffly lifting their drinks to taut lips. As the ghosts left them, they tightened their circle, one amongst them, whose macassarred head signaled a swell. A lot of syllables, too. A lot of $5 words, I have to say. Drifted towards our genial host. After some words, both came up to us. Mr. Scrooge introduced him. Mr. Edgar Hobnail, so he said, owned a cotton mill and had a lively interest in horse racing. He offered me his arm without actually requesting the honor of a dance. Still, he gestured, brooked, no mistaking and no refusal. So it seems I'm hellbound if I'm to listen to some of the present company, he laughed, nodding at Mr. Scrooge near the refreshments on the far side of the dance floor. I heard now perfectly, especially with his moist lips near my ear. I pretended otherwise and did not reply. We spun past Mr. Marley. Once more and again, I could distinctly hear, for that brief moment, 41 pounds, 18 shill. Before my partner spun me elsewhere, his hands slid lower than my shoulder blades, hot and tight and sodden. By the end of the dance, I had been made to understand that his elderly mother needed a companion as his grasp slipped to the small of my back. I was relieved to put my chair's back between my waist and his hand. Emily awaited. Surely sensing an all too familiar situation, she asked if I would not care to go onto the terrace for some fresh air. We happened upon a gathering of the grander young ladies of the evening. One nodded briefly, then turned back to her own party of peers, when another remarked, "But Mr. Marley has not danced with me, nor me. I can only say I'm glad of it. What would those chains not do to my hems should he trip? And how is it he has not tripped? Still, it's odd. He only dances with—" A few of them glanced over at us, and the first of them cleared her throat. They shivered, though whether from the cold or from the idea of sharing a brief embrace with a visitor from hell, perhaps made for a distinction without a difference. Having had our fill of the chilly atmosphere, Emily and I made our way back into the ballroom's oppressive warmth. At a tap on my shoulder, I turned to one of the girls from outside. "Excuse me, as we have not been introduced, but did either of you perhaps lose this?" She held in her hand my locket. My hand darted to my neck, which indeed was bare. In a sudden panic, I blinked back tears, thinking I might have just lost this last trace of Papa. Thanking her effusively for her kindness, coming to us as she did, unacquainted. Still, I dared not presume to introduce myself, not knowing if I had to do with a young lady of rank. Gracefully, however, she sidestepped strict etiquette, introducing herself as Margaret Bewick. In turn, my sister gave her our names. Foxley. The name is not unknown to me. I told her of my father, who had some little reputation for having concluded the Jarndyce versus Jarndyce suit. I could think of no other reason for her to have heard of our family name. Then it was he who saved our inheritance, mine and my brother's. We are orphans, and there was a dispute with our uncle. Oh, it was long and bitter, and doesn't warrant repetition here and now, especially on Christmas Eve. But he saved our very livelihoods, or we might have ended up. Her eyes flitted to my paper rose, and she cut herself off. You must do me the honor of presenting me to your mother, and allow me to have you to our home for tea. After she made our mother's acquaintance and promised to return, she was swept away in a schosstiche. Opening the locket to reassure myself it still retained its treasure. Opening the locket to reassure myself it still retained its treasure, I found instead a small folded piece of paper. At the shock of not immediately spying the key, my heart beat apace in my breast. Unfolding the scrap, though, there lay the tiny gold thing, nestled in an inked scribble. What to make of the paper I had not the least idea, and opened it to find a scramble of writing I could not make out. At first I thought the hand must be in another alphabet. With a string of 5 digits on the back, I guessed it might be a raffle ticket. Did I have a chance at the diary in spite of it all? As for the rest of the scrawl, inspiration struck, and I held the paper up to the mirror wall panel. Before my eyes, the writing transformed into more puzzlement. To each key a lock, to each lock a key. What to make of this? Had Miss Bewick returned my locket and offered me the ticket as a gift? Though entirely unacquainted with her at that moment, and how in so short a time? The hand was not, however, feminine. Was this some sort of assignation? A poem? A cipher? By way of the mirrors, I thought I could just make out Mr. Marley coming up to us. I turned to see him in person and found instead the pale young man I had seen from before. Miss Bewick introduced our party to her brother, Mr. Lawrence Bewick. Soft-spoken, he addressed my mother. Margaret has told me whom we have the honor of meeting here tonight, and I would like to join my sister in asking you to afternoon tea in the coming week, or as soon as might be convenient to you. Flattered, Mama pretended some confusion in previous engagements, of which we of course had none, despite which a date was soon settled upon for the coming week. A hesitant Mr. Bewick risked a bit more even, and asked me for the favor of my next free dance. That, embarrassingly, was just beginning. Upon finding me at liberty, a smile came to his lips. It did not, however, seem to reach his eyes. Their otherwise limpid blue remained clouded. Despite his serious demeanor and unsure step, my partner was the most agreeable of the entire evening. He engaged me in conversation without the least distaste or distance, and his touch was light on my back. His eyes did not perhaps smile, but their gaze was kind. No stern stare over my head or at the back wall. He even came back from the refreshment room with sherbets for Mother, Emily, Margaret, my mother, and myself. The topic turned to his acquaintance with Mr. Scrooge. Mr. Bewick had benefited from his attention when the businessman had provided him with an education and welcomed him into his warehouse as an apprentice, only to find he had no gift for commence. He had begun a study of the law under his patron's auspices, though had abandoned it when he finally came into his inheritance, which I understood had happened not so long before. Mr. Scrooge refused repayment. Mr. Bewick mentioned his debt. Become now one of the heart to his benefactor and pledged to contribute to all of his philanthropic efforts. I'm not really digging this this writing, I have to say. I really don't like the way that these sentences are structured. The raffle was my brother's idea. Like, I understand what's happening here in the story. I don't know. Maybe it's meant to just kind of like be creating a mood. Let's see what happens with this gentleman here. Maybe they're going to hook up. The raffle was my brother's idea, his sister chimed in. It seemed to me that something of the sort might be serviceable, if I am to judge by my sister's attachment to hers, he mumbled. I added how beautiful it was and how I loved having a repository for my unguarded thoughts. Having a repository for my unguarded thoughts. From writing it was but a short step to reading. He asked our opinion of The Mill on the Floss or Castle Richmond. Of course, I could not pretend to know the latest novels and demurred, speaking instead of Jane Eyre and sonnets from the Portuguese, hardly books on the tip of the fashionable tongues, but close to my heart nonetheless. Yet at this, in a voice I could barely distinguish above the din, he quoted Mrs. Browning. Art's a service, Mark. A silver key is given to thy clasp, and thou shalt stand unwearied night and day, and fix it in the hard, slow turning wards, and open so that intermediate door, betwixt the different planes of sensuous form, and form insensuous, that inferior men may learn to feel on still through thee to those, and bless thy ministration. The world waits for help. He declaimed with more ease. Let me see what's going on here. What happened? All right. He declaimed with more ease than he danced. Both the words and their low timbre were equally sweet, jumping from heart to lip. At a mere passing reference to their author. As he spoke, I thought I spied a reddish scar peeking above his neckwear. I looked away, sensing something of this soul I had spied alone and apart, and his distance from his fellows. My cheeks rushed with warmth at the hope of further exchanges, but I caught myself. Still, I looked once more at those cerulean eyes set into the pallor of his skin. At this, his own face flushed, but his eyes seemed to clear. He offered to lend me some newer romances, which I could return at my leisure. Suddenly, Mr. Scrooge beckoned him. Making his apologies, he turned to answer his benefactor's call. Miss Bewick then brought up my father, his work on her and her brother's behalf during their childhood. He seemed a knight in shining armor to us as small children, shuffled about between various relatives' homes. Our welcome, whichever place it was, depended on the standing of the suit. That was Byzantine, at least. In fact, your father would summon us to his chambers, where he very kindly simplified how matters stood, and he insisted on addressing us personally rather than speaking over our heads to our guardians as any other lawyer might have done. And kind of how this piece of work is doing to me with the writing. Before we left, he also told us each and every time stories of orphans and of fortune favoring the hopeful as well as the bold. I think I owe him my sanguine view of luck. With my brother, it went differently. Please forgive my frankness, as neither Lawrence nor myself were brought up to the niceties of ceremony, but it is such a delight to see him not only put so many words together at once, but even to dance. He had, she explained, fallen into a depression of spirits in the midst of the suit. Despite its favorable settlement, a general melancholia endured, spending his time primarily in authored worlds between two book covers. He had little interest in consorting with others. Mr. Scrooge only owed his presence at the ball to the young man's sense of abiding obligation, but little induced him to join in the pleasures. When the fall and swell of the crowd had once more swallowed up both Mr. Bewick and his sister, Mr. Hobnail slinked towards me once more. Have you given any thought to becoming my mother's companion? I can pay you pretty well, I can tell you. She most often is asleep at all events, and your duties would be light. You could come and keep me company at those times. The life of a single man can grow lonely. If the words were not enough, there was his ingratiating smile and roving eye, and the small of my back still recoiling from his earlier touch. Unless he thought me entirely degraded, he could believe I was young enough not to understand between the lines, but I had Emily's painful recounted experience behind me as well. I knew now of these masters of the house with their wandering eyes, and worse. It was clear from his leer alone that I would have matters to attend to other than reading to his mother. You are a pretty thing, prettier than your sister even, and it looks like a bit of pin money would not come amiss. I looked at his mop of artificed curls, slick with hair oil. His smile was too wide, with mercury blackened teeth. He put his hand under my chin. My stomach lurched. My own mother, watching Emily on the ballroom floor, neither saw nor heard above the music and conversation. She began to cough over the noise. I thought of her need to be at the seaside, her life perhaps in play. No governess job could fund such a luxury, even were it only to let rooms in season. I thought of Sophie and Charlotte hungry and growing up without benefit of any kind of lessons which might cultivate their minds and souls or help them up in the world, or even of proper society. I thought of Emily in the clutches of another ravening wolf, and who knew if she would find another situation without a character from the mistress. We had not the savings for the shop we dreamt of, caste or no. We looked an impoverished spinsterhood, or worse, directly in the eye, as Mr. Hobnail tried to get me to look into his. At 17 now, none could claim me too young to earn my keep. It wouldn't take much cajoling for mother to allow me to leave home and send some part of my wages back for the rest of the household. If I did this thing, I could never again face the mirror or the blank page again. This I knew. I turned to Mr. Hobnail and, swallowing something bitter that tasted of potato, smiled back. The words would not come. Perhaps, he suggested, as I hoped my mute, stupid, sickly smile seemed merely mysterious. We could further discuss details more comfortably over some champagne. Knowing full well he wanted to tempt me away from Mama, I followed. I put away my locket reveries to concentrate on the matter at hand. I would need fortitude in all thoughts on the future. Certainly none of Papa. Emily glimpsed me and my company from the dance floor. Her frightened glance chilled me before her partner winged her round from view again. We were at the doorway leading to the refreshments when an almighty clamor arose. All eyes turned to Mr. Marley, staring straight in our direction, rattling his chains and bellowing of brimstone and damnation. Mr. Hobnail blanched and looked at me, eyes popping in alarm. Making his excuse, he pushed past me to another young lady and asked her to dance instead. Though relieved in the moment, my greater circumstance had not changed. I sat down, spent, and reflected on what to do should he approach me again, or should I humiliate myself in approaching him. Lost in such thoughts, I held my fan against the sweltering atmosphere when suddenly the air turned frosty. The shade sat beside me against the mirrored wall. A sigh came from the depths of him that might move anyone on this side of the underworld, but in gratitude for his aid, however temporary, how could I help him in his anguish? He began again with the sums. 60 guinea, then attempted once more to open his mouth. He uttered 120 pounds, 2 shillings and 3 pence. He seemed frustrated and kept turning towards the mirror as he pronounced these various numbers. Finally, I too turned in my chair towards our doubles in the glass. There his reflection became perfectly understandable to me. The very fact of this left me astonished, and then I began to take in the meaning of his words. You are a poet, Miss Jane Foxley. After my earliest school days, I never read another poem. There was nothing in it, I thought, all humbug. Yet it is not so. Words have saved harder souls than mine, and so it falls upon you to bear witness in beauty and power to the torment of the poor, the widows and orphans, and to what end their abuse must lead. There are those prowling here tonight, ready to feed off the distress of those without protection. I myself can only warn ill-doers of imminent spiritual destruction. You must not be caught up in such machinations. You, of all of us, must not cast aside hope. You were born the very night I saved my former partner from eternal hellfire, and so you bear in yourself the promise of second chances, of redemption even. This chance is with each and all of us, but quickened in you with your birth. You are the child of the Spirit of Christmas grace. I stopped at this. The commonness of my plight mocked his speech. My moth-eaten shawl covered a drooping paper flower, which covered in turn a rip. I was planning to betray my father's hopes and all my upbringing to Mr. Hobnail for a bowl of lentils. I and how many others to an army of hobnails. Giving myself to the man would mean the travesty of all tales of honor that I had told in my life, either to my sisters or myself. Poor Mr. Hobnail. Is Mr. Hobnail not deserving of love? God forbid Mr. Hobnail enjoys the touch of a woman. Could I ever even write again? Yet I was ready to do this if it meant raising up Charlotte, Sophie, Emily, and Mamma. The ghost knew it. I was hardly some angel or guiding star atop a gold-decored tree. Yet he was clearly sincere. His translucid eyes in the glass compelled me to listen. I must tell you, too, that in our company this night, there are others burdened by their own despair, other kinds of fetters than mine, haunted by other demons, half their own forging, half that of a cruel fate. Some have wished even to shorten their torment by unspeakable means. One so burdened might find succor, salvation even, in the strength of your verse. Indeed, in the warmth of human companionship and exchange. In the mirror, his eye urged mine to follow his gaze, and it fell upon Lawrence Bewick's reflection. Surprise, surprise. I could now perceive shadowy bonds engulfing his slim mortal person. The apparition continued his confession. I never read a poem to a young woman so as to gain her heart, much less marry and have children. I died without heir of either the flesh or the spirit. No man or woman loved me, and what was there to love? I see the poetry now, in the very tragedies of those closed to the beauty around them, who see nothing in their lives but the monetary value of their things at best, or their bank accounts at worst. 17 years ago this night I was allowed once more amongst the living, so that at my witness men might mend their ways. I have striven in that time to bring understanding to those blinded and bound as I had myself been by the world's narrowest ways and means. I have been true to this charge and have brought some few souls from the brink of perdition to the business of common welfare, to the love of fellow man and woman. My time with the living is counted each night by hours, drawn back into the maw of suffering by the weight of chains I myself forged. It is also true that over these many years gone, that as I have freed a soul here, a soul there, back into the lively bonds of our shared humanity, these fetters have grown lighter than the year before. A money box falls away, then a ledger. Still, the padlock remains tight and heavy upon me, and without complaint I still must bear it, as it is of my own manufacture. I have little hope to be quit of it before the end of time. I looked at the padlock whose keyhole opened a mere whisper for all its iron workings, wishing I might do something for its weary prisoner, and yet I with nothing to offer. I wanted him to know that one among us would remember him and wondered what might serve as a reminder for him. I thought of how his intercession his intercession had scared off the bogey of flesh I must still later face, and how my father's own soul might thank the wraith in the hereafter. This gave me an idea. It wrenched me, but felt, in the face of all the wrongness I was ready to commit, to be at least one right action, no matter what it cost a girl I was bidding farewell to, no matter how fruitless the gesture, and what use might I have for it once I was to engage myself with Mr. Hobnail's offer. I cannot guess what key might relieve you, Mr. Marley, but on this my birthday, please let me be the one to give you a gift. I opened my locket and took out the key and placed it in his glacial palm. Keep this as a token from one who wishes you peace just as you have, whilst undergoing your own suffering, offered the way to peace to so many other erring hearts. Accept it, please, until you find the key that will unlock this final coil of chain from your soul. I don't know how I imagined my diary key might help him. I did want to understand how he knew of my writing or even of my birthday before I could ask. Mr. Scrooge mounted the podium, tapping his glass and clearing his throat. I turned back around to hear the winner of the raffle. I held my breath and opened out the paper from my pocket. The number called did not match, and one of the bells minced her way to our host. I flinched as she received the diary into her soft white grasp. My heart fell into my slippers, but what difference did it make? As matters were soon to stand, I would no longer have need for somewhere in which to weigh my thoughts and deeds. Only the puzzlement of what the message might mean grew stranger. I turned to Mr. Marley, thinking he might, as it were, hold the key, but he had vanished. The band played its final waltz. As the ball wound down, the Bewicks warmly insisted on sending us home in their carriage, which was a boon to us, certainly. Else we would have traveled home by foot under the melting sleet. I snuggled into the woolen mattress with Emily, careful not to wake the others on the farther side of the bed. A 3/4 melody lilted me to sleep by the light of a blue-eyed gaze, but my dreams were tainted with the escape route offered by Mr. Hobnail, and how I must go about finding him again. It seemed I had a key to an unending series of doors, and yet it fit none of them until he was behind me, and instead of going to him, I was running again towards these doors whose locks would not open. Down this long hallway stood now a chainless Mr. Marley, now a bechained Mr. Bewick. I kept trying to reach them, and I'd find myself in the arms of Mr. Hobnail, chained in my turn. Some hours later, I woke to Sophie and Charlotte bursting into our room. "Jane, you must awake, for heaven's sake," as they burst into our room. Sophie held a brown paper package high in the air, squealing, "Package in the mail! My sister will unveil, upon her will prevail, these tidings of wassail. No delivery on Christmas Day, as all abed she lay. What can we do to make her play?" Groggily, I thought up, "You may stay," and lifted myself onto the pillow, flattened by nightmares and worry. I shook them from my head. Indeed, the package held no sign of a sender's address. Tearing at the brown paper with as much care as my sleepy fingers could muster, I wondered if I were still dreaming, For inside I found a gilded-edged volume bound in indigo velvet. From its ornate heart-shaped lock dangled a key. I gathered myself to unlock it finally, marveling at its marbled end papers, running my fingertips over the voluptuous, Bristol-textured blank leaves. Then, interspersed at each turning, the pages contained blank banknotes, one by one, 100-pound notes fluttering through the air. Sophie and Charlotte gathered them up, and after a moment of hushed awe began to shriek. My frightened mother rushed in, and seeing the bills in the girl's hands, stood motionless with her mouth agape. Once I had gathered myself together, Emily and I counted them one after another to make sure we were getting the sum straight. Looking at her, I could tell she was thinking, as I was, of railroad shares, or opening our seamstress shop, or mother letting rooms by the sea, or even all of these. When I turned to the last page, inked nonsense appeared. I knew the trick of it now, however, and asked Sophie to fetch me the mirror. To each key a lock, to each lock a key. Astonished, I brought out the note from my locket. The string of digits had never been a raffle ticket. It announced the sum of money, the book enclosed. As I held open the volume to the mirror, more paper fell out of the back cover. This was no banknote, but a document folded and sealed. Without hesitation, I broke it, and I learned that I was now heir to the unclaimed fortune of Mr. Jacob Marley, as well as to his estate, as administered by Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge. So the poor downtrodden winning the lottery ticket. You've got a golden ticket. There was no longer even need to think of starting shops and letting rooms, much less dream of it. I grabbed Charlotte. Emily grabbed Sophie. And with their warm little bodies closed in our arms, we began to spin in celebration around our mother. We cared not that we knocked into the bedstand, into the chair, as we twirled our joy to be released finally from the shackles of bitter want. 1 week later, it was a carriage taking us to our tea engagement, the winds of a new year buoyant in our heart's sails. The end. You got a golden ticket. Well, there it is. A Christmas Tale. That was probably the longest read on the live stream so far, but actually it did not turn out to be that bad. Not exactly my my cup of tea, but nevertheless, it was a decent tale for what it was. Moving right along, let's head into let's do the last one real quick. We'll go over 2 hours. I'll just run it. We do have a video to watch, and this comes courtesy of the Euro Trash podcast. The Euro Trash podcast. And this is why the Mongols didn't conquer Europe. Let's get right into it.
So why didn't the Mongols conquer Europe then? Were the Pope's letters actually effective? Probably not, right?
No. So the Popes basically, the Mongols basically kept essentially demanding his submission.
Mm-hmm.
And they believed this is where they definitely had Europe wrong. They believed that the Pope had actual power and could force let's say the other kings of Europe to submit. And so they constantly asked for that, and of course never happened. But yeah, they did. Of course, they reached into Croatia even.
Yeah.
They reached all the way to the Adriatic, and they had defeated, of course, these major European armies at Liegnitz and at the Battle of Mohi in Hungary. And so they had no real reason to stop, apart from the fact that Ögedei, the Khan at the time, died. And so they all had to go back for the Kurultai to decide the next ruler. And so this is the most basic explanation of why. There are other factors, of course, things like their armies were largely, of course, based on horses, and so do you need steppe lands, etc. But they also conquered plenty of areas that they couldn't use their horse archers in. So yeah, it's not a convincing argument in my book, and that seems to be the most straightforward, is the best one.
But how come they didn't come back after the feasting and choosing the new Khan, right? Or sorry, Genghis Khan.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a sort of a bit of a lull period in the fact that Guyuk, who succeeded Ögedei, the third Khan, only lived for a couple of years, and then his wife took over, and she ruled for a couple of years as well. And so there's this bit of a lull in the 1240s, and then basically what happens is there's a coup, and the descendants of Ögedei, who had been chosen to rule, are overthrown. And Tolui, Chinggis's youngest son, his eldest son, Mönke, becomes the next Khan. And he sort of changes the goals. So he's the one who sends the two biggest invasion groups. And that one of those is to conquer the Sung dynasty in southern China, and the other with his brother, or both of them are led by his brothers. The other goes west under his brother Hülegu to conquer, in essence, the assassins, the Ismaili assassins in the Middle East, and the Caliphate of Baghdad. And so these two things are the sort of big projects of.
So this is the infamous siege of Baghdad, then.
Yes, yeah. And Mönke, in fact, dies before either of them are completed. But those are completed by his brothers in the end. But by that point, the Mongol Empire is no longer a united entity.
Okay.
So it dissolves in around 1259 when Mönke dies.
Goddamn Mongolians!
Okay, just going back to Europe, just one last time.
Yeah, sure.
I've heard a podcast once, and I don't know if the guy was a historian. I don't think so, but he referenced some historians that allegedly say that Europe was kind of like a third-rate power at the time, behind this flourishing Islamic empire, as well as behind, of course, China, and that its eventual kind of elevation to the status of first-rate like power was possible only because the Mongols have single-handedly conquered and shattered both of these powers. What do you think of that theory? Does it make any sense, or?
Well, I mean, Europe is not a power. That's one thing.
Okay.
Europe is incredibly divided at this point. There's no, even of course when Europe becomes powerful, it's individual nations that become quite powerful, right? I mean, they're not doing it together. The thing is that you could say, the Caliphate, for example, which is this great power in the Abbasid Caliphate, which has ruled for 500 years or so. I mean, the Mongols destroyed that, but it was already a sort of a shadow of its former self. And yeah, I mean, calling Europe a third rate, I would say Europe is about a sixth rate power at this point. I mean, you have many other states. So of course, China is not one state at this point. There's 3 states there. In the Middle East, you have several states as well. Then the Mamluks appear in Egypt, and they're the ones that Europe. So at some point, basically, what happens is that the Mongols who went to Iran and Iraq and Syria, they create their own state called the Ilkhanate, and their big rivals are the Mamluks in Egypt. And so these are slave soldiers who started a dynasty in the mid 13th century, and they were big rivals. And then the Ilkhans begin to try and get Europe to join them to attack the Mamluks. So they are aware, of course, of the previous Crusades, and they know that the Europeans, have this sort of religious idea about.
So they have good intelligence.
Yes. So it never works. It never pans out at all. But yeah, there were these constant letters going back and forth to try and coordinate. To coordinate an attack on the Mamluk state. So yeah, this is when the period of where Europe and the Ilkhanate are sort of trying to get together to gang up on their enemies, the Muslim Mamluks. Yeah, so I mean, I think there is a book, a famous book. I've forgotten his name. He was one of my professors at St. Andrews. And it's the medieval making of Europe, and it's the idea that there is a period where Europe starts to sort of grow up a little bit because of less pressure from the East. But I wouldn't say that's super accurate, but because of course the Ottoman Empire comes in, and the Ottomans are by far the most powerful power in Europe. So yeah, that doesn't really pan out in my book. It's really the discovery of the New World and the resources that provided, and the technological advances that happened later that really allow European powers to become what they were.
I don't really have a whole hell of a lot to say about that. And I'm not really sure why you wanted to share that with me, but regardless, there it is. Little history lesson about the Mongols. Goddamn Mongolians. But I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I'm a little bit of an anthropologist myself. Yes. Did you know that most people know that the Homo sapien actually originates from 3 very distinct genotypes. That's right. These genotypes are the Caucasoid, the Mongoloid, and the Negroid. Yes. But little do people know there was actually a 4th genotype called the Hemorrhoid. That's right. Unfortunately for them, however, their gene pool did not stand the test of time because, as it turns out, those people were just too much of a pain in the ass to deal with. Well, that's it for me this week, folks. Hope you had some fun. Hope you discovered something new. And I'll be back here for you next week. That's right. Same time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a good week.